is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Well, hello YouTube family, it is me, Miss Dana Ashley. Today I'm coming from outside beautiful mountains of Southern California. Wanted to get a little bit of natural sunlight, although I'm pretty much in the shade. You may see some scene changes or lighting or audio changes. I'll try to do my best, but I'm kind of tired of being cooped up in the house all the time, so bear with me. And today, you guys, I have so much incredible information to cover in an effort to keep this video out of the controversial list. So I'm going to be using a few abbreviations, and you'll see here, if you look at your screen, the very first word at the top, when I have to say that word, I'm just going to say CV. The second word, this country that the social media doesn't like us to talk about too much, I'm going to say CH. The third group that is all over this thing, I'm going to say the WHO. Finally, UNITED nations, I'm going to say UN. All right. That guy at the bottom who finally left this world not too long ago, I'm going to call him David Rocker. How about that? These are words I'm going to have to be saying a lot in this presentation, and the more I say them, the more I'm going to go down in visibility, and I think this is something that everyone deserves to hear about. I really am sorry I have to do this. It's just where we're at. I hope I don't annoy you. Today I want to bring you some insights regarding the cause and the symptoms, okay? Note the word symptoms of CV that you have probably not yet heard. And no, this isn't about some patent or some P4 lab close to the seafood market, but it's about something far more profound. It is concerning the impacts, such as the inability to breathe, such as having a cough with no phlegm. Rather odd for pneumonia, wouldn't you say? And things like suddenly falling over with no other signs of sickness. All of these things can be related to something completely different than a virus. So let's explore this little reported fact about what has been happening in CH. Did you know that this country went live with fully functional FIVEG? Here you can see the announcement from a Chinese website all the way back from 2018 in April that Wuhan, we all know that city by now, don't we, will be a pilot city. Here it says, a large-scale FIVEG network engineering program will be piloted in Wuhan.
It ends by saying, by 2020, 5G network will cover every corner of the city and be available at an affordable price. So if I go to the link and copy it, and then if I go to Facebook to share it, you can't share this link, and your post couldn't be shared because this link goes against our community standards. Interesting.
This country went live with, yep, look at your screen, guys. It went live by fall 2019. Furthermore, their hospitals have been supercharged with this most of all, FIVEG, or 60 gigahertz frequencies. Yes, here you can see Huawei, CH biggest telecom provider, is attempting to show their philanthropy by donating FIVEG equipment to that. Everybody heard about the hospital that went up in 6 days, right? Did you hear that they donated the equipment to it before they even were functioning? Oh, isn't that nice of them? There were tons of articles all over the internet I was able to find talking about the hospitals being completely set up with this frequency-bearing technology. Now, what does it do? For those of you who don't already know, in 2015, over 200 scientists from 41 different countries already communicated their alarm to the United Nations, to the UN, and to the WHO. By 2019, 26,000 scientists had signed the petition calling for a moratorium, an urgent and complete halt to the FIVEG rollout due to its having been proven, quote, harmful for humans and the environment. And in response, they got a big, fat nothing burger. And while the WHO has named that EMF contamination in occupational and residential areas can be a stress factor, they have done nothing and have no plans to encourage the public toward the eradication of these fields at all. So, FIVEG, specifically the 60 gigahertz frequency that is being used in CH right now, and by the way, which is slated to be released all across America, has very specific biological impacts that very few people realize, and some I've been able to piece together and will be presenting to you here in this video. How these impacts from this radiation can perfectly mimic the pandemic that everyone is up in arms about. While you will see truly viral, non-stop news feeds pushing out the fear, the virus coverage. And while it could be true, like I posted in my last video of leaked footage, that CH is underreporting these numbers, what they are not telling you, and they will not tell you, are legitimate reports on the road of exactly what symptoms these people are experiencing, because then you too can start to put it together. But also, you're not going to see any correlation of the timing of this outbreak to the release of the 60 gigahertz frequency. So, we know that 60 gigahertz has been released all across China because, like America, they too have decided to make that specific millimeter wave unlicensed. Why does that matter? Just like the FCC allocated 2.4 gigahertz to be unlicensed, which is why all your Wi-Fi routers, your landline cordless phone, even your baby monitors are running on 2.4 gigahertz microwaves. Because the companies that make products that run on microwaves, they don't want to pay a separate license fee to use it. And so what people don't know is that the FCC didn't just randomly pick 2.4 gigahertz. In fact, it was selected by this entity right here. Look at your screen to see it because I'm not going to say it. Right. These guys were responsible for its selection. Do you know what other products they make? Now, this 2.4 is a frequency known to cause these problems I won't go into now, but my point is, in the same vein, 60 gigahertz is also selected to be the next unlicensed frequency, and so we the people will be bombarded with it. That means to me, we need to know what it does. What does it do? Well, not surprisingly, that's also something you have to dig very deep for. So for just a second, can we just all ponder for a moment that every single one of us, by the time we were in junior high, learned and were tested on the work of Louis Pasteur, right? But none of us learned about Nikola Tesla in school, did we? No. Who is Nikola Tesla, you ask? You may know about good old Elon Musk and his car, but do you know who the actual Tesla was? Oh, only the inventor of the AC current. Yeah, that stuff coming out of the socket in your wall that powers everything in your house. He invented x-rays. He invented radio. Yes, he did, 4 years before Marconi. He invented the remote control. Let's just have a moment of silence for that invention alone. He invented the laser. He invented the electric motor. The list goes on and on. He was even responsible for bringing us wireless communication, which I feel pretty sure he would not be wanting to be used against us as it is all now. But considering he died alone, penniless, in a hotel room right before his work was confiscated, none of this is terribly surprising. My point is, we are being educated on the forms of science that they want us to consider valid, while keeping our education limited on those forms of science that may expose what they're trying to accomplish. We have PhD level biological and chemical scientists coming out of our ears that there is no such thing as a PhD in magnetobiology. What's magnetobiology? Exactly. It's the study of how electromagnetic fields, like 2.4 and 60 gig, have impacts on the human body and all biology in general. Like bees, you know, key to our food chain. Wouldn't you think that the study of the very fields that have been exponentially increased upon all of us would be something that these groups would be funding? You would think, but they're not. Anyway, I digress. So, the impacts of 60 gigahertz are not widely published information, but here's what I can tell you. And it's in part, ironically, from the promotional material of the big telecom companies themselves. Here it says, 60 gigahertz has a very distinct impact on none other than oxygen itself. Yes, here are the articles released by companies who are touting the benefits of 60 gigahertz. They openly admit that 60 gigahertz is absorbable by oxygen. You can see in this graph here its impact on oxygen. All the frequencies before 60 gig are not impacted. Then once it hits that frequency, it spikes and becomes hugely absorbed by oxygen. Now in this article by the companies selling products that are going to run on 60 gig, they say that it's going to help its interference levels. Oh, isn't that nice? They don't want your first shooter video games to lag. And most of us know from mainstream releases promoting FIVEG that things like water and trees are going to get in the way of this frequency. So how in the world does this even make sense that we are using it? Unless their intentions are something else besides faster speeds. Anyway, knowing that this frequency impacts oxygen, now does it make sense to you how possibly when you mess with the absorption of oxygen in the human body, let me give you one guess which organ is going to suffer first. The way that the 60 gigahertz impacts oxygen is this. Oxygen, the atom, is O. Oxygen, the molecule, is O2. Two atoms together. Now these two atoms creating the oxygen molecule are sharing some electrons. 60 gigahertz causes the electrons surrounding oxygen molecules to spin. Right. Somewhat akin to how high-powered microwaves running on 2.4 are impacting molecules in foods such as water. They're heating in part by impacting those molecules to rotate or oscillate with each wave. The movement energy from the rotation of these super tiny water molecules is actually helping to heat the rest of the food. So in a similar way that 2.4 causes H2O to oscillate, 60 gigahertz, even at lower powers, is causing the electrons on oxygen molecules to spin. And as you might imagine, changes to the spin frequencies on oxygen electrons can have impacts on human biology. When you breathe in, the reason that breathing air into your lungs gets oxygen into your blood and therefore in important places like your brain is because the oxygen entering into your lungs gets picked up by a very important iron-containing protein called hemoglobin in your blood. But the unfortunate impact of oxygen molecules spinning the electrons is that it makes the hemoglobin unable to uptake the oxygen and get it to the rest of your body. Now, this info is taken from a textbook called Magnetobiology, Underlying Physical Problems. But even beyond this, isn't the fact that the telecom companies are admitting that 60 gigahertz is absorbable by oxygen just stunning information? And shouldn't the fact that 60 gigahertz even fundamentally interacts with oxygen, the most abundant and arguably most important element to all of biological life, be headline news that stops everything until we deeply test the implications of that? If you believe that they must have already tested 60 gigahertz for health and safety, please listen very carefully to what Big Telecom admits when they were asked that very question.
5G, as you well know, also uses higher frequency waves that don't travel as far and will rely on a network of hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of small cell sites. And the question then is, are there any health implications, any public safety implications? So my question for you, particularly Mr. Gillen and Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Senator. I think, thank you for your focus on the issue. Safety is paramount, and as you alluded to, we rely on the expert agencies, we rely on the findings of the FDA and others as to the requirements to keep all of us safe. There are no industry-backed studies, to my knowledge right now. Happy to visit with you as to what opportunities you think there needs to be more studies, and we're always for more science. We also rely on what the scientists tell us.
So essentially, the answer to my question, how much money? Zero.
I can certainly follow up with you, Senator. To my knowledge, there's no active studies being backed by industry today.
Anybody else know of industry commitments to back research, fund it, support it, to ascertain scientifically the health effect?
No, I'm not aware of any.
So there really is no research ongoing. We're kind of flying blind here, so far as health and safety is concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Is this all starting to make sense? What they are calling the CV is acute respiratory disease. And while you can't believe 100% anything coming out of China, it seems to me there were enough leaks of people suddenly falling over in the streets that the CH government doesn't want people talking about or sharing, with no other apparent illness. Guys, listen, CV is not new, okay? It's a cold, it's a flu. That's why it says on the side of hand sanitizers like Purell and the side of a can of Lysol that it kills it. It's common enough to be listed on the most common disinfectants. But now the CH government is admitting that people can have virtually no symptoms and suddenly fall over. No symptoms, but then they can still have it. What is it? Lack of oxygen can do that too, right? I mean, let's use common sense here. What happens to you when you have the flu, right? You start to feel bad, achy, you call in sick, you don't want to go outside, you go to lay down in bed, mama brings you some chicken noodle soup, right? Are you just bopping around fully clothed, doing normal things, and fall over? If your lungs are not able to put oxygen in your blood, how long would it take you to fall over? Not long, okay? Not long. So we're going to get into some specific symptomology besides these that I just mentioned in a minute, but I can already hear some of you asking, but Dana, what about those quarantine cruise ships? They weren't even in the city of WHAN. That's very true. And I have some very relevant news for you on that topic. These ships that were quarantined just so happened to be from the Diamond Princess line of cruise ships. So let's check out this PR release from Princess Cruises. Continuing Princess Cruises' comeback new promise, a commitment focused on investing more than $450 million across the global fleet. Now here they go into some of these very expensive upgrades that they have added. Well, one of the upgrades that they go into great detail explaining on their website with high-end marketing videos showing exactly how it works is their network connectivity. Here's from their press release. Carnival Corporation and Regal Princess announces they will, quote, establish a new industry apex in connectivity capabilities. It says, using its newly developed connectivity service, Medallion Net, and working with SES networks. More about them in a minute. They talk about attempting to achieve unheard of bandwidth and how Medallion Net is made possible through, quote, an inventive array of an antenna, networks, equipment, and configuration innovations that combine to make the Regal Princess the only vessel on the planet that is currently capable of achieving this speed. Well, according to the SCS website, there are some Navy ships that can do this, powered by our O3B fleet of MEO or medium Earth orbit satellites. Yes, they are admitting to working with SES, and although they're calling it Wi-Fi, that is a misnomer considering that the company seems to be using millimeter waves. Here are a few clips from some of their videos.
Stream movies, shows, and sports, as well as make Wi-Fi phone calls and video conference calls like FaceTime. That's all possible in large part thanks to what lies on board, what flies in the skies above, and the way we fuse all the technology together to ensure your experience is as great as possible. Medallion Net uses mid-Earth orbit satellites, or MEO, that are positioned 8,000 kilometers away. There are 20 MEO satellites surrounding the equator that see our Medallion-class ships, which aligns with destinations like London and Vancouver, and which corresponds to approximately 80% of Earth's surface. GEO satellites actually still reign supreme when enabling connectivity in the polar regions. This is because GEO is not impacted by rain and weather. So onboard Princess Cruises ships that feature Medallion Net, we leverage MEO and GEO satellites to keep you connected to the things you love most, and seamlessly shift to GEO when in the north. Thanks, GEO. In these tougher conditions, we're glad you're there.
So by admitting in their own video that water can interfere with the connectivity is the giveaway that they are using millimeter waves and not just the type of frequencies that Wi-Fi runs on today. Now, when you look a little more into this company, SES, that's when you find this crazy information. You can see they're presently teaming up with governments, including the U.S. government, and of course our MILITARY. When you look at tabs like this one that starts intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions, one realizes this company's products and services catalog looks like a Homeland Security dream, or privacy lover's nightmare, depending on how you want to see it. And here you can also see on the SES website that they are using these satellites to beam none other than what? 5G. So, are these passengers getting sick from a VIRUS? That, by the way, they are admitting that the people on the ship haven't been tested for, or are they getting sick from millimeter wave frequencies being beamed at them even while they sit trapped in quarantine? Wow. All right. So what about all those other cities? Other cities that people have left CH4 and still got their CV virus? Well, I mean, the ones that I'm not watching this every minute. I've been working too hard on this piece. But all the cities that I found that supposedly have this, this has happened to so far, they are people who are already openly advertising that they have FIVEG themselves. Places like South Korea, check. Hong Kong, check. And then to further your questioning about what Central CH is actually dealing with besides the VIRUS, there was that news released in several alternative sources, and some even mainstream in 2018-19, announcing that CH had completed construction of a project to build a giant antenna that was 5 times the size of New York City. Do you remember that? It said this experimental radio antenna is rumored to have taken 13 years to finish, and although its official purpose was, quote, to detect earthquakes and minerals, others speculate it would be used to communicate with submarines. While the article states the exact site of the facility has not been disclosed, but information in Chinese research journals suggests it was in the Huazhong region. Oh, just so happens to include Wuhan, the capital of the Hubei province. There you go. So there's that. But, you know, let's get deeper into what 60 gigahertz can also do. Now, this was an interesting paper released by one specific hospital in WHAN, and this doctor with this YouTube channel, he was going over them in great detail. You know, a lot of people have a lot of attention on this, but unfortunately, they're not looking at it through the eyes of the FIVEG that I'm sharing with you now, and so a lot of things to him don't make sense, but when you look at it knowing this, it all fits together rather perfectly. Of the people admitted and studied in this particular hospital, they got real specific about the symptoms, and so they broke it down from outpatient to those admitted in ICU. And of the people admitted into intensive care, it says this: over 60% of people had acute respiratory distress, respiratory failure. Symptoms included shortness of breath, rapid breathing, and bluish skin tone. Can that happen with lack of oxygen? Yeah. They had arrhythmia. I don't know how much you guys remember, but microwave frequencies can absolutely cause this. He couldn't explain it with his normal background. There was also shock. That is a state of insufficient blood flow to the tissues as a result of problems with the circulatory system. Now, of all the muscles that work really hard, wouldn't you say your heart is one of them? So when you start running, you start breathing hard. Why? Your muscles need more oxygen to continue working, right? Now, if you're not getting that into your muscles because it isn't coming into your hemoglobin, there's no feeding your muscles, including your heart, thus, right, acute cardiac injury, which is also listed in this. Now, while it's true, pneumonia also causes respiratory distress and an inability to get proper oxygen. That's true. However, don't we all know by now that pneumonia causes your lungs to do one basic thing? Fill with fluid. Fill with phlegm. Yummy. Almost every 101 tutorial on pneumonia says the same thing. The main problems with pneumonia are the lack of oxygen as a result of phlegm. And how you can even tell what phase of pneumonia you're in according to the color of your phlegm. Well, check this out. Now, much of what I'm finding regarding this CV is pointing to people who don't actually have fluid in their lungs at all, but they have dry coughs. Not wet coughs like this, but dry coughs with no phlegm. So in the same report, this doctor found the same thing, dry cough. But also, these social leaks of media, people who are using social media, they're so desperate. They're desperate to get help. Here they're saying the same thing. Look at this. Inability to breathe and dry cough. So please, would one of you virologists care to explain to me why these people have respiratory distress, aka can't breathe? if there's no phlegm causing the problems with oxygen uptake? I mean, besides the 60 gigahertz frequency making hemoglobin unable to properly bind to oxygen. Now, a lot of people had scans. Scans are showing that people have damage to the lungs. But how do we know that this isn't due to other repercussions of millimeter waves on oxygen itself? I mean, when your voice, I mean, this is slightly off topic, but not really. When your voice matches a frequency of a crystal glass, it becomes absorbed by it and it shatters, right? I'm just saying, why am I having to ask these questions? Also, it's mentioned, acute kidney injury. We know kidneys can be damaged when there's so little oxygen in the blood that the other gases become higher, like carbon dioxide in the other ones. Acidosis of the blood happens. Again, guys, I am not a doctor. Do not listen to anything I say. This is for entertainment purposes only. However, I'm just trying to use common sense here and ask some questions that no one else seems to be asking. So, CV seems to cause many problems, okay? They can all be tied to a lack of oxygen and acidosis of the blood. Now, we know that the impacts of magnetic frequencies can have a result of things like seizures, right? How often do people with pneumonia have seizures? But we have seen tons of leaked footage of people with exactly that, seizures. I've also heard fungal infections mentioned in relation to this, and electromagnetic fields can absolutely exacerbate fungus and mold. Now, of course, people talk about fevers in the media, but they also say they can have all these problems without the fever. I mean, how many times have you had flu without the fever? I'm just saying. But along with this theory I'm sharing, wouldn't it make sense, given the possibility of a frequency WEAPON? How do we know if a mild fever can't also be a result of all these other aspects of 60 gigahertz? The answer is, we don't know. We don't know. And I don't want to belabor this, but please, could someone out there who actually knows magnetobiology and who's not employed by the WHO or a big pharma company get on this? Because I'm not qualified. If you're really starting to take all of this in, everything that I'm saying, and you're starting to consider this as a possibility, your mind may start to spin with the major implications, and it should. When you consider how huge a narrative, guys, when have you seen more? Every single video on YouTube has millions of views and hundreds of thousands of views on this. And you're thinking, how could they lie, right? You have to ask yourself, who does the MSM work for? And if you already know the answer to this question, please feel free to fast forward a few minutes, but I like to make my videos for everyone. So for those of you who haven't questioned this, we all need to understand whose agenda we are dealing with when we are watching mainstream agenda. First of all, there's that unfortunate fact that over 90% of media is now owned by only 3 corporations, including a lot of social media and most online media. Understandably, these global corporations have many conflicts of interest. How many AT&T and Verizon and pharmaceutical commercials do you watch next to your news shows? I'm just saying. So you need to know whose voice you're hearing when you listen to their fear-mongering tactics. To help you understand, you must take anything that the media promotes heavily with a boulder of salt. I'm going to share with you a very special quote from a very unique person. A person whose lineage not only started and continues to rule big oil, but whose philanthropic foundations also infiltrated the very medical institutions who teach our doctors what medicine is. Please watch How Big Oil Conquered the World by James Corbett to learn much more in depth about this most important topic. So, what does this man say about media? This man with this lineage. He says this. The following quote was taken from a 1991 speech and released transcript of a private Bilderberg group meeting in Germany, who, interestingly, also apparently had Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton in attendance.
We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other publications whose directors have attended our meetings and restricted their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government.
It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world had we been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. He's thanking the mainstream media for discretion AKA keeping their big mouth shut about what they should be reporting on, but aren't. They want you looking away from the things that would expose their, quote, world plans, and towards the things that not only won't jeopardize their plan, but will help bring it into fruition. The funny thing is, a lot of these truthers that I'm seeing, they're talking about the CV being a bio-weapon, as if saying that is exposing the elite, when in fact, it's just moving their agenda forward instead. Now, whether you think this virus is wild or a biologically created one, aren't you still going to be screaming to keep quarantining people that are heading towards America from CH? And are you going to be happy when they haul them off to military bases instead of letting them come home? The people in that cruise ship can't leave, nor can they leave the 60 gigahertz frequencies that are still beaming them.
We're working very closely with China and other countries. Work with China. They need our help, and especially in terms of vaccine development. The country has about 4 or 5 exciting vaccine candidates that are out there.
Meet Peter Hotez, who not only received his PhD from Rockefeller University itself, but a shill of a man who rides on the millions of dollars of funding allocated towards constant vaccine production.
In the end, when you have a virus that's so highly contagious, that's really the only way you can tamp down an epidemic. So we're working on a vaccine. There's 4 or 5 others. Yeah, you probably are. Now, when the rest of the world is seeing all these other crazy rabbit holes they're creating, like, oh, Russia thinks America started it, and when China sees that their government is handling this very badly, and once again not taking care of their people, this isn't just about duping America. It's about duping everyone. Can you see, with all of this mess, the people of the world throwing their hands up and being like, oh, we need a higher power to take over this mess? Exactly. Never mind that the UN and the WHO and other groups involved with Mr. Rocker's lineage are very pro-5GEE. And psst, hey America, so is your president.
The race to 5G is a race America must win, and it's a race that we will win.
Remember, the very group, WHO, is the same group that has done nothing to stop the dangers of these high frequencies for the rest of the world, even though hundreds of scientists are petitioning they do. Now, for those of you who may be wondering, but what about the virus itself? I mean, aren't they testing this? And they can prove that it's a virus? Remember, we have heard, even in the MSM, that China hardly has any tests to confirm whether or not people have the virus, right? That's pretty convenient, isn't it? So many times people are going to be coming down with this, symptoms of this, and they're going to label it acute respiratory problem and perhaps even dying from it before they test. And when that happens, aren't they going to just assume that it's a positive case of CV? I don't think we're ever going to know the real answer to that question. But then there is the sad fact that many of these hospitals are incapable of testing even if they had them. And so what are they doing? They're sending their samples to the possibly compromised WHO themselves. As you can see here in the symptom sheet by that hospital I showed you earlier, they did just that. But beyond all this, if I were to talk about some other suppressed truth regarding VIRUSs themselves, beyond the obvious that few ponder, that, look, viruses aren't even alive. You know that, right? Even Wikipedia calls virus an agent. They're not made up of cells. They're essentially a protein encapsulating a genetic piece of material, bits of double or single-stranded DNA or RNA. The reason that antibiotics don't work on viruses is because antibiotic, anti-life, they're not biological entities at all. Which is not to say that these things can't go in and cause damage, but for the truther community to now act like this CV, just this one, is suddenly manufactured, this thing has me wondering now if all of them aren't created for decades now. Because again, they're more like a set of commands, kind of like a bad robot trying to get his RNA where it ought not be. Also, we have to be very critical when they are pumping fear at us and ask, have there ever been times in our history when we were told to fear a virus, but then their cure for it proved to be far more dangerous? The answer is a resounding yes. Many have pointed out that there are CVs that are patented, and there are. And some of these patents even mentioned that they are created to place inside of what? VACCINES. And so, all right, this is where this whole presentation can start to get very slippery for me. Because if I go into here now how many highly regarded scientists have been admitting from the 90s that the genuine isolation of a virus that we were all told to fear, right? If I show you how some of these scientists said, you know, that thing was never actually isolated. And you know, AIDS actually isn't caused by that.
They've got to hold on to HIV. Why? To hold on to their funding.
It's a disgrace for any other disease. With this much disagreement about the cause, we would by now have a balanced portfolio.
They're dispersing AZT to 200,000 Americans in the name of a hypothesis that stands unproven, a drug that is the most toxic drug that has ever been licensed for long-term consumption in the free world.
And if I talk about the devastating results of the ATZ drug that the people took that actually caused the symptoms known as AIDS, it's over for me. And if I talk about the devastating results of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation going all over the world, giving well-being SHOTS to little girls, causing some of them to die within 6 months, it's not going to work out well for me on this YouTube, CNN tube, NBC tube platform.
So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. We could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
$1 billion over the next 10 years to make it the year of the vaccines. What does that mean exactly?
Well, over this decade, we believe unbelievable progress can be made, both inventing new vaccines, making sure they get out to all the children who need them. We could cut the number of children who die every year from about 9 million to half of that if we have success on it. And the benefits there in terms of reducing sickness, reducing the population growth, it really allows a society a chance to take care of itself. And the benefits there in terms of reducing sickness, reducing the population growth, We've seen now there's a type of foreign assistance for vaccines or for AIDS treatment that are incredibly effective. These are all about saving lives. And the good news is that as you make those breakthroughs, the population growth in the country goes down. These are all about saving lives. The population growth in the country goes down. The good news is the population growth in the country goes down.
I think what I'm probably going to have to do, if you want to get deep into this part of it, is to create a video that I'll put up a link to on my Patreon page, and I will have it backed up on a site that I'm now almost all the way uploaded called Brighton.com. It's where a lot of YouTubers are going that have been taken down from YouTube, and so I will have to put this kind of information there. But at the risk of my own ejection from this platform, I just had to add this. Mr. Gates' constant reiterating of the benefit of these shots being able to reduce the number of humans in the world may seem completely bizarre, unless you also happen to read section 13 on the insert of almost every inoculation created, which requires that they admit that not only have they not been tested for the ability to cause the big C, that rhymes with answer, but also have not been tested for genetic mutation, or the ability to, quote, impair fertility. Nice. But the last incredibly pertinent thing I'll show you regarding this entire CV issue and the whole video would be this study right here. Huge eye-opener regarding why there needs to be proper testing of these frequencies as well as of the SHOTS for mutations. Check this out. quote, exposure to 50 hertz electromagnetic field induces activation of the Epstein-Barr virus genome. The abstract ends by saying, this finding provides additional evidence that DNA can be modulated by a magnetic field. Oh, you mean those untested electromagnetic fields that they're going to start freeing up and cranking all over America? They could activate mutations of dormant VIRUSs from DNA? DNA from what? And why would we have latent viruses and random DNA in us to begin with?
Do any of the vaccines on the childhood schedule contain monkey kidney cells?
Well, the polio vaccine does.
Are you aware of any simian, monkey, viruses, meaning viruses that come from primates, that contaminated polio vaccines and infected individuals receiving the polio vaccine?
Yes, SV40.
Okay. And what does SV40 stand for?
Simian virus 40.
Okay. And was it the 40th simian virus found? Is that
Yes.
why it's called? Are you aware of any virus from any animal other than simian or bovine that is in any vaccine?
Yes, there's a pig virus present in one of the rotavirus vaccines.
Can you go to Kinrix on the first page?
Yes.
Tap IPV. Do you see in the third line down, it says calf serum? Do any vaccines on the childhood schedule contain embryonic guinea pig cell cultures?
Varicella vaccine was passage in guinea pig cells.
Do any vaccines contain gelatin from pigs?
Yes.
Do any vaccines on the childhood vaccine schedule contain human albumin?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What is human albumin?
Human albumin is part of human serum. It's part of the blood that is liquid.
Do any vaccines on the childhood schedule contain MRC5 human diploid cells?
Yes. Rubella, varicella, hepatitis A.
What are MRC5 cells?
They are human fibroblast cell strain. They were created by taking fetal tissue and from a particular fetus that was aborted by maternal choice, and the cells, the so-called fibroblast cells, were cultivated.
If you could turn to page 3 for MMR and MMRV. Do you see that within the ingredient list that lists WI38, human diploid lung fibroblasts?
Yes, I do see that.
Isn't it true that human DNA in vaccines is typically purposely fragmented?
Yes.
This study involved 74 fetuses.
Yeah, 76.
76.
Mm-hmm.
And these fetuses were all 3 months or older when aborted, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What organs did you harvest from these fetuses?
A whole range of tissues were harvested by co-workers.
Okay. And these pieces were then cut up into little pieces, right?
Yes.
And they were cultured?
Yes.
Okay. Some of the pieces of the fetuses were pituitary gland that were chopped up into pieces to, okay, included the lung?
Yes.
Okay, included the skin?
Yes.
Kidney?
Yes.
Spleen?
Yes.
Heart?
Yes.
Okay. And tongue?
I don't recall, but yeah, probably yes.
Are you an atheist?
Yes.
Okay. When you were a child, what vaccines did you receive?
Diphtheria. In childhood, I think it was probably only diphtheria.
That doozy of a deposition you just saw was of the grandfather of vaccines himself, admitting a plethora of dormant VIRUSs from a variety of animals and DNA, as well as cultured tissue from aborted human beings, placed all cozy-like right inside of the SHOTS that many of us have already received. Could this be from where these pieces of DNA capable of mutating are derived? I don't know. What do you think? Just know that there are certain things that this pro-one world plan will not tolerate. Let me just give you an example of what I mean. All right? All right, can you see this? All right. These are 4 controversial topics on this board, right? So, now you can get demonetized for talking about these, but they're still going to leave you around, okay? Although it's getting worse all the time. But one of these is guaranteed to get your books taken off of Amazon. It can cause your own web host to shut you down. It can cause your email campaign company to turn you off. And can you guess which one it is? This one right here. Now keep in mind that number 1 and number 4 even have an entire network that it has at least a good amount of content promoting these topics. But number 3, oh no. Now if you want to figure out the true plan, the true, what they call deep state, which is just another created word, that is meant to destroy us, then you need to figure out what topics no one can talk about. The right or the left are not exposing. Although one of the right or the left does have a lot more truth than the other one, that division is meant to divide us amongst ourselves. And given that your boy Trump is promoting FIVEG and he's telling people to get their...
They have to get the shot. The vaccinations are so important. This is really going around now. They have to get their shots.
SHOTS, I hope you will at least consider what I am saying. Now, speaking of getting your SHOTS and the inability to speak, I have to show you just this one last thing. Now, while many people on YouTube already talked about Bill Gates and his big prediction of a CV only a few months before all this happened,
it began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died.
But not nearly as many showed how at this same conference, a 201 event, being hosted by not only the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but the UN and the WHO, spent almost a quarter of the time talking about not how to come together and help people suffering with disease, but instead talking about what new extreme measures to take when people spread any information that doesn't line up with their ultimate goal.
As levels of trust fall and people stop cooperating with response efforts. This is a massive problem, one that threatens governments and trusted institutions. National governments are considering or have already implemented a range of interventions to combat misinformation. Penalties have been put in place for spreading harmful falsehoods, including arrests.
We're at a moment where the social media platforms have to step forward and recognize the moment to assert that they're a technology platform and not a broadcaster is over.
And on various social media channels and cable networks, there's been some conspiracy theories that are around about the potential that pharmaceutical companies or the UN have released this for their own benefit. So as we move forward, obviously trust in pharmaceuticals and government is very important at this moment.
I think with the social media platforms, there's an opportunity to understand who it is that's susceptible in what form to misinformation. So I think there's an opportunity to collect data from that communication mechanism. The second thing is, with that ability, we can identify false information more quickly. We are actually receiving reports about people trying treatments that are purported to be effective but are actually harmful. And the quicker that's recognized and can be countered, the fewer people will fall susceptible to those things.
One thing we haven't spoken about, and I'm wondering whether it's time to talk about this, is a step up from the part of the governments on enforcement actions against fake news.
And they were clear what the ultimate truth that they would validate would be.
I think a couple of things we have to consider are, even before this began, the anti-vaccine movement was very strong, and this is something specifically through social media that has spread. So as we do the research to come up with the right vaccines to help prevent the continuation of this, how do we get the right information out there? How do we communicate the right information to ensure that the public has trust in these vaccines that we're creating?
Other tactics that they mulled over under the disinformation part of the summit included how they thought that it's not only best to saturate the mainstream media with their version of truth.
So there is work that's being done to actually create algorithms to sift through information on these kind of social media platforms. And I know that the Gates Foundation and others are funding organizations to work on things like this.
Which, thanks to Susan Wojcicki turning YouTube into NBC Tube and CNN Tube, that's already happening here, check. But they also mentioned how important it would be to reach into private businesses, to get CEOs of corporations to encourage people to do what they say.
There's considerable trust by employees of their employer, and that's been borne out by our own trust barometer in the last several years, where it's extraordinary the amount of trust given to the employer. And coupled with that, in times of crisis, as we're living, the role of the CEO and the trust given to the CEO for advocacy and for advancement of accurate information is considerable.
They are so desperate to garner trust however they can. They even mention multiple times infiltrating faith-based organizations.
I do think that there needs to be sort of an honest broker, a centralized command and control organization that really brings together the public-private sector, both on a global approach and also on a local approach.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. And I wanted to speak to the point about having the honest broker. And I think in this regard, the United Nations fits the bill.
I think a complementary tactic, too, is to tap faith-based organizations and civil society and other institutions to recruit them also to basically, almost at a grassroots level, continue to basically have the integrity of the information.
Yep. They're planning to infiltrate your private business, your job, your local churches, your pastor, to get you to do what they say. Wow. So I'm not sure how much longer I can do this work. And I would like to please thank you to any and all of you who have supported me, either just through an encouraging email, through PayPal. I'm trying to find an alternative to that, but also my Patreons, who I can count on every month. It's such a support to me. It is the only thing that's keeping me going at this point. I want to keep going, not just to talk about this stuff. Actually, I want to do a lot more on spiritual matters, because to me, ultimately, that is the most important part of all of this. Look, we are coming into a time where we are going to be forced to stand up against the powers, the rulers of darkness in high places, and say no. After all, it's my body, my choice, right? Or does that only apply when I want to extinguish a life from within me? Lastly, I would like to end with an amazing and inspiring comment that I just recently got from a subscriber who, after watching my video on wireless radiation frequencies and some of the things I did about FIVEG, she did something amazing in her own community. I quoted your channel and videos at my last City Hall meeting, and I had watched, studied, and memorized your video on FIVEG. They had wanted to literally rip apart and destroy the only natural part of my city, which is beautiful, which has a beautiful lake surrounded by wildlife, to put in FIVEG. And to add insult to injury, they only wanted to give my city $25,000 a year to do it. Not on my watch. So I crammed your videos for days, and I went in alone to my City Hall meeting and actually forgot my notebook at home. So I just winged it, and I actually have a pretty good memory when I want to. So I got up there and I spoke from my heart, and I educated everyone, and I specifically quoted you in your channel. Everyone was taking notes and writing your name down to go to your YouTube later. And the judges were asking me a lot of informative questions, and so I had all the answers and they were writing it all down. I wanted to pre-educate everyone and set the tone before the pro-FIVEG person stood up, and I did. He went up there and rambled. He aggravated the judges by repeatedly putting his foot in his mouth. He tried using the, quote, FCC regulation and standards, quote, we all know that don't have anything to do with our health, being run by Thomas Wheeler and all. He just repeatedly contradicted all the correct data I had just enlightened everyone with, which kept confirming how much of a liar he was. Then he finally put his foot in his mouth for the last time as the judge realized his sneaky agenda. He was trying to use and manipulate my city and justice system, all the while lowballing us and making it seem like they were doing us a big favor. When one judge had that realization, That was it. He said, "Are you trying to tell me you're using my courtroom as your own personal negotiation playground? Absolutely not. Access denied." He then got scolded like a little child by everyone present from our legal system, and everyone completely agreed and unanimously and loudly, "Access denied." And when it was over, I got up and walked out, and everyone followed me, asking me who you were and what was your channel. I actually just started writing it down on old receipts I found in my purse for the old people who didn't have a phone. And I actually had people tell me that they only came to listen, but that I inspired them and gave them the courage to speak up for themselves in other cities. And I absolutely 100% have to thank you for all for this. Guys, this just goes on, and it talks about this woman that had the incredible confidence to stand up and speak her truth. And I know in certain places it's not working, but in some it is. And the 5G system is being slowed down now. So, guys, we have to see through this fear-mongering media that is causing us to run directly into the arms of their solution. And we need to go instead fight for our rights to breathe the air that God gave us, okay? I just wanted to end with this because I found it so incredibly inspiring. And this person who had no previous education on the matter, like me, I don't have any education on the matter either. But guys, we have to do this. We have to get out there and stop it. Go out and find if your local community has already agreed to allow FIVEG on their light posts. The efforts that the people have made are slowing this down, and they are making a difference. And guys, this is as important as the air we breathe. I love you. God bless you. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Sometimes you can sit down and talk to the devil and he'll make a lot of sense. He can really get philosophical. He can get technical. Oh, he can get religious. The devil has a lot of things to say. When you stop listening to God, that's when you start listening to Satan. Amen. And I certainly believe in a personal devil. Now you may say, well now preacher, the devil doesn't bother me anymore. Well, I'm glad you got there. I'm not quite there yet. I don't know how you got there, and I don't know where you are. But believe me, he still bothers me. You're going to have to make a choice. You've got to decide today, which one am I going to serve? I want you to remember something. That Bible says that there are fiery darts from the devil. These are darts, these are arrows that he fires at you, and he's firing them constantly. And the only thing that can keep them from penetrating your soul is the full armor of God, the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, amen. Your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace, the sword of the Spirit, amen. When you stand firm in that armor of God and say, Satan, I am not what you say I am what God says I am, and I know whom I have believed, and I'm persuaded, amen. Amen. I'm persuaded he's able to keep that which I've committed to him. Against that day, you better believe that the war is a war, my friend. It's not a game. We war, but we don't war after the flesh. We war after the Spirit, and the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they're mighty unto God to the pulling down of strongholds. So maybe while I'm preaching to you right now, Satan is working your mind over. He's filling your mind full of filthy thoughts. It doesn't help if you spent last week in front of a computer watching pornography. That's not going to help you. If you're buying little girly magazines and spending your time looking at this stuff, my friend, don't be surprised if it doesn't suck the very life out of your soul. Make a choice today. Are you going to choose life, or will you choose death? We all make that decision, and we make it every day of our lives. And it'd be a good thing if you told the Lord every breath you took, every day of your life, Lord, my life is in your hands. My heart beats because you tell it to beat. I live because you tell me to live. I exist because you exist. I am what I am by the grace of God. Hallelujah. If you do that, you might be surprised at how that kind of thinking will affect your life.